Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again. So you have found your niche into getting into real estate. You might have even seen the last video of what does that really mean and stay away from real estate. If you haven't seen that video, go back and check it out because it does talk about the different ways to become a real estate professional, and it doesn't just include getting licensed as a real estate agent. This video is going to specifically talk about assignment of contract in wholesaling, okay? Lots of questions came up from how do you actually assign the contract and how do I really wholesale a property? There were still some questions in there. So we're going to talk specifically about the assignment of contract during a wholesale deal, and I'll dive shallowly into, is that a word? Shallowly? I don't know. Into a double closing, which is the other way you can make money wholesaling real estate. All right, so without further ado, let's kind of jump into the process of an assignment of contract. Let's figure out what that is, how do you do it, and then after that, we'll talk briefly about, that's probably a better word than shallowly, briefly about double closings, how it works, do I need money, do I not? You're in and out in about 10 minutes. Let's go. All right, so like I said, we're going to talk about assignment and then briefly talk about double closings. So double closings and assignments are the two exit strategies for a wholesaler to make money. Key differences in an assignment of contract: the wholesaler, which is you, never actually purchases or owns the subject property. You actually get the contract put together, you have a clause or part of your real estate contract from your state actually involves an assignment clause already written in there. Make sure you have to have that assignment clause in the real estate contract or you will end up buying the property yourself. It's not always a bad idea, but if you're working with literally no money in your pocket and you're working as a wholesaler, which is a great way to get into this business to make money and start building your capital, if you don't have that assignment clause, you will have to purchase the property or you will lose your earnest money. Okay. Also, keep in mind, not every state allows assignment of contracts in real estate. Make sure you check with your state regulations to see if it actually is legal in your state to do so. Most states allow it still. Here in Colorado, they're kind of cracking down on the kind of loosey-goosey format of wholesaling. There are some things that have changed recently as of February of this year, 2021. So keep that in mind as well. If you're in Colorado, you want to make sure that you understand the assignment rules here as well. Okay? But key point, make sure you have an assignment clause. I'll show you the Colorado contract here in a minute of how it reads and what you actually have to put into the state-approved contract in order to make sure that you're allowed to assign it. That being said, once you sign the contract to the end buyer, which is be the cash buyer, you will collect your fee. Generally, a wholesale fee is between 5 and 10% of the purchase price, and there's a couple ways you can kind of structure that. I'll talk about that here real quickly in a minute. But you will get paid at the end closing, which is the closing where the cash buyer at the end buys the property from the original seller. Okay, again, so wholesaler makes money by collecting assignment fee when the real estate takes place, closing takes place. Therefore, you never own the property and your name or your company name will never actually appear on the chain of title. Boy, I'm struggling today. Woo! Okay, real quick example of how that happens. So the first transaction is seller A and wholesaler, which is you, is B, starting a contract. The second transaction is basically the wholesaler B and the end buyer C, which is the cash buyer at the end of this thing. Investor B, you will purchase, as an investor, which is sometimes me, you guys can wholesale to people like me, you will purchase a subject property at a discount from a seller and then immediately sell that property to a new end buyer. Okay, this is actually going to start discussing a double closing. Let's pause for 1 second here and take a look at the real estate approved contract. Okay, so before we dip into this, again, you are a wholesaler. You're basically the middleman in this real estate transaction. If you do an assignment of contract, you don't have to have any money other than possibly putting up escrow, which, putting up earnest money into escrow to hold the contract. In Colorado, you have up to 72 hours to get earnest money to the title company or wherever it's being held in escrow, or you're actually in breach of contract. So you have to have at least the earnest money here in Colorado to make this happen. That's not always that big a deal. Sometimes it's $1,000, sometimes it's $5,000, but you got to make sure you understand how the earnest money is going to work. Sometimes you can flip that contract within 72 hours. So you don't even have to put the earnest money up, okay? But keep in mind, every state is different when it comes to those regulations as well. So here is the contract to buy and sell real estate in Colorado. Right here at the top, parties and property, buyer, seller, this is all filled in, and then the property. Right here, what does this say? No assignability. This contract is not assignable by the buyer unless otherwise specified in additional provisions. So you have to go down to the additional provisions and write in that this contract can be assignable by you if you want to. Now, they may not accept this contract. The seller may not accept this contract if they see these additional provisions written in here. So let's go back down here real quick, all the way down. Additional provisions. This is where you have to actually write in here that you're allowed to assign the contract if you want to a third party. This has to be filled out. Again, if you're doing wholesaling correctly and you're working ahead and you're speaking with the seller before this gets put into place, they know you're going to have this assignment in here, okay? But you are talking to the seller and giving them full faith in your ability to be able to close the deal, whether it's you or the end investor, the end cash buyer, that person will close. You already have your network. This is not the video to understand all the network stuff. I've got other videos in the wide world of real estate. Go out and check those videos out. I'll leave a couple links in the description so you guys can find those videos, kind of explain how you set up those networks, the people you need in your back pocket for these kinds of wholesale deals, and then you'll be ready to go ahead and put this contract together confidently and be able to write in the additional provisions here in Colorado, at least. You're going to sign the contract, okay? So that's how you do it in Colorado. Again, every state has their own real estate contracts. This one is 17, 18 pages generally. I know some states have like a 4-page contract. So keep that in mind. No regulations in each state. Again, you don't have to have a real estate license to be able to even fill out this contract. But keep in mind the assignability and the wholesaling laws in your state. Okay, so now, like I said, assigning the contract, you never actually purchase or own the property. You literally are flipping paper. You're handing over paper to a third party. You get the property under contract at an obviously agreed to price, but that agreed to price is going to allow wiggle room, or your fee, your wholesale fee, to the end cash buyer investor that's going to go ahead and flip this property or buy and hold. Make sure that you're doing your research, doing your homework on ARV, construction costs, everything in between, so you understand what you can actually get this initially under contract for before you assign it. Again, same deal. If you don't know what an ARV is, you don't know any of the stuff I'm talking about right now, I will leave a couple of the links for these videos, but go check those out in the wide world of real estate. It'll explain how you actually figure out what your set price is going to be on this contract. This video is just about assignment of the contract and, as we're going to talk about right now, possible double closing. Okay, so we went back through this and talked about how the second person involved in this, which is you, seller, agrees to a contract with you, and then you go ahead and flip that paper to the end buyer, which is the cash investor at the end. Okay, so instead of assigning the contract, you're going to go ahead and do a double closing for various reasons. Maybe it's legislation in your state allowing or not allowing assignments. Maybe the contract isn't written that way. Maybe you know you can do a double closing. You've got the end cash buyer in place, but the initial seller doesn't want you to assign it. You'll set up a double closing. Let's walk through that really quickly, as I was briefly doing before. Again, we're basically flipping the contract either way, but now we're doing a double closing. So investor B, that's you, will purchase a subject property at a discount from the seller and then immediately sell that property to a new end buyer. The funding can be set up in a way where the cash proceeds from the investor's sale to the end buyer, which is the cash investor, can fund the purchase from the original seller. So from the seller to you they're gonna actually do 2 purchases of property in one sitting. That's what a double closing is. Make sure, again, going back and talking to a title company, go talk to those title companies and ask them if they'll be able to do a double closing. Even if it's allowed in your state, not all title companies will actually allow a double closing or would want to do one. So connect with the ones that will, just in case you need it. When the title company receives the end buyer funds and closes out the sale from the initial seller to you, that's A to B, the investor can then immediately close out the sale from you to the cash investor that you found at the end. So when the end cash buyer closes the deal, proceeds from that closing are what the investor makes on the deal. That's you. That's what you're going to make as your wholesale deal. Again, it's agreement, or that's the gap in the purchase between what you got it under contract for and what the end cash buyer is going to get it for. Okay, 2 ways this can go. You're either allowed to have funding in escrow or not in escrow. So real quick, if your state allows the seller to you closing to be funded by the second closing, which is be the end cash buyer, the wholesaler does not need to bring money to the table. So this is the case where if you can fund this in escrow, you can close in escrow, then you don't need any money because the second closing will fund both transactions. So, like I said, in this case, ultimately the bringing the money will fund both deals. That's the end cash buyer. He'll fund the deals. She'll fund the deals at the end of the whole transaction. If there's no allowance of escrow, okay, so if you can't close an escrow, or if the state doesn't allow it for some reason, that means the funds will not be allowed in the second closing to be used for the purchase in the first closing. That means the investor, you, has to bring your capital to the table. Now, you can do this by short-term funding to leverage the deal literally for hours if you need it. You have that set up with a bridge loan. You have it set up with one of your hard money lenders. Let's just say even you have your own cash, but you just don't want to do the flip on this project or buy and hold on this property. You just want to wholesale it, or you found something else and that's why you're wholesaling it. You can literally just use your funds to close the first transaction and then immediately have that double closing. On the second closing, the end cash buyer then goes ahead and does a conventional closing. Okay. If the investor does not want to utilize his or her own cash, like I said, you can use those types of funding. In a double closing, the wholesaler will briefly own the property before selling it to that end cash buyer. This does mean you will appear on chain of title. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. It's just more paperwork. A double closing also involves 2 separate closings with 2 sets of closing disclosures. So those HUD-1s or other settlement statements, that you guys use in your state. So first property in the closing and then the purchase of the second property, those will have a lot more paperwork if you go about it this way, because you're signing a lot of documents and literally having 2 separate transactions. That becomes a hand cramp session. A double closing is also more expensive than an assignment. In a double closing, the investor, and sometimes it may be you, that agrees to pay the closing costs on why am I not be able to talk today? And then purchase. So that means you're going to either you or the end cash buyer is going to pay the closing costs on both the transactions. Okay, so keep that in mind. You got to pay closing fees on each one of these. In the assignment deal, the investor never actually owns the property, which means the investor will typically not have to pay closing costs for either transaction. Again, another way why assignment is a better way to go if you can make it happen. Make sure you evaluate your level of risk, what you're comfortable on. Make sure you have your team set up, including the end cash buyer, before you get into these wholesale deals. I can't stress this enough, you guys. If you just jump into this thing and you don't have your team in place, meaning your title company, sometimes even a real estate agent involved helping you if you're not licensed, you at least an attorney that can help do the transaction, help you with the contract, and you don't understand what you're reading on the contract, you're going to get slapped in the face. Wholesaling is a great entry-level way to get into the real estate industry, but you do have to have a team in place. Like I stressed in the other videos, make sure you have a title company. Make sure you have a pool of investors that you're talking to saying you can get these deals put together for them, and then understand what assignment means, okay? Hopefully this video explained a little bit better how you can flip that paper, how you can assign a contract, and option B would be the double closing, as I explained briefly. That is... Hopefully, I ran over on the 10 minutes. Sorry, I lied. But hopefully that gets you a little bit further down the road as far as understanding how that works. If you still have questions, drop them in the comments below. Go check out the other videos. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button on the way out if you haven't yet. And do me a favor, if you did like this video, if it made sense, if you want to save it for later, hit that like button, hit that thumbs up. It really, really, really is important for us to be able to get these videos out. They don't get pushed by YouTube if they don't get likes. Okay, so I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video and you hit the thumbs up on the way out. I know it sounds like I'm begging, but it's necessary for me to get out this information to a broader audience. Appreciate you guys. Check out the other videos. Don't forget the live stream on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And until next time, guys, keep building.